All right, so my name is Demar Walker, Demar LX Walker. If any of you follow me on Instagram, you'll see me as DLX Pilot. A lot of people ask what the DLX is for. As you see, my name's Demar Lennox Xavier, so it's Demar Lennox Xavier _ Pilot. And Roderick mentioned that today I'll be talking about Airbus. I thought it would be fitting as well because we have a lot of aspiring aviators, I should say, in the group. Thought it would be fitting as well to kind of detail a little bit, not to bore you, just to detail a little bit about my path to where I am right now, so you can get a little bit of context of where I've been and what I've done leading up to my trip to or journey to Air Canada. So without further ado, let's get into that. So as actually, before we talk about that, what are we talking about today? So we're talking about my path to the office, called the cockpit the office. We're going to talk about the Airbus A320, which is the aircraft that I do fly. We're going to talk about some features as well that makes Airbus unique. Unique because they pioneered some features, and now later on there's some aircraft manufacturers that have mimicked what they do, but Airbus did pioneer a lot of the things that we're going to talk about today, or they approach it slightly different from current other airplanes. And we're going to have a question period and a little bit of a discussion because I know there'll naturally be a lot of questions. All right. So as Roderick mentioned, I was Jamaican born. There's a picture of me in Jamaica as a young aspiring aviator. I knew from very early that I wanted to be a pilot, and I was fortunate because as a kid in Jamaica with parents migrating to Canada, I got to fly on airplanes very, very young. And that's where my love for aviation started, was getting a trip to a flight deck at a very young age, seeing all the buttons, switches, dials, and wanting to become a pilot. So that's where the journey started. I knew my whole life wanted to be a pilot, so I took a lot of initiative with the things that I did to ensure that I could make that path as simple as possible. So that's one of the reasons why I like clubs like this, because I feel that mentorship and guidance is key, because I looked at some people that what they did to get to where they are and essentially mimicked what they did, talked to a lot of people, asked some questions, and didn't really have an aviation club per se to join when I was younger. So having this opportunity to talk to aspiring aviators and people who want to get in the industry, I feel it's key to your success. So here's a picture of me. That's in the Island Airport in Toronto, Ontario, where I live right now. And I got down there, I saw an ad on TV. It was 1888 be a pilot. Literally, that's what it was. And I called that number and they set up an introductory flight for me. So this was back in August of 2000, and that was my first ever flight lesson. Moving on, so took that flight lesson, and I knew I liked flying, but getting in an airplane when you love flying, you better be committed because the bug is strong. And when you go flying in an airplane, it becomes very addicting very fast. So I decided, okay, yeah, I wanna become a pilot. So I set myself up for that path, and I knew I wanted to get a degree. And it worked out that when I was starting my university search, I found the University of Western Ontario, and they had a program that started in 1999. I started university in 2003, and their program combined a university education with flight training. So decided to go and do that so I could do my university degree. So I have a degree in management, commercial aviation management, with a minor in geography. And I also had from Western my integrated commercial pilot's license, where they gave me about 240 hours of flying. So my flight training started at the University of Western Ontario. Here I am with a Cessna 172. That was during my second year when I started flying, and you can see the registration there, a little bit of the play on words there. It's Foxtrot Uniform Whiskey Oscar for the University of Western Ontario. So this is one of their aircraft that I flew in my flight training there. So I graduated with a ICPL, which is an integrated commercial pilot's license. I mentioned that was about 240 hours of flying. Rod, a quick question for you. If am I able to ask the members some questions? Would they be able to unmute their mics to answer a few questions, just so I'm not talking all the time?
Yeah, they can.
Okay. Okay, perfect. Because okay, so one of my questions here is, can anyone tell me what aircraft that is that I'm standing beside in this picture?
Yeah,
I can.
is it up?
I didn't hear any of that.
Oh, can I take a guess?
Yeah, go ahead.
Is that an F-18?
No. Definitely not. But nice try.
All right,
Nice try.
A380. That's an A380.
No.
Is it a Seminole?
Man.
Is it a Seminole?
Yeah. Yes.
Oh,
White
yeah.
Piper.
I was close.
Yeah, you eventually got there. way on the other end of the spectrum and then back down to earth. So yeah, so that's a Piper Seminole, and that's what we got our multi-engine rating on. That was the first multi-engine aircraft that I flew. That's what I got my multi-engine rating on. So I had my multi-engine rating on that, and then I went and got my IFR during the ICPL integrated commercial pilot's license process. So I graduated from Western with the ICPL in what you call a Group 1 instrument rating. In Canada, it's a Group 1, and it just means that the engines produce thrust, non-centerline thrust. So that's what I have in, that's the airplane that I'm pictured beside. So then for me, I graduated in 2007. So while I was in school, it was around 2003. It was 2 years after 9/11. And this is why it's important for everyone in the group right now who's going through flight training, experiencing COVID-19 and this downturn in the industry. There was a lot of negative back then. And when looking back at it, it wasn't anything really compared to COVID-19. Yes, there was a drop off, and yes, a lot of airlines failed after it. There was a lot of furloughs, but looking at how the impact of the industry now with COVID-19 and looking back at 9/11, you see that COVID-19 has a much greater impact. But suffice to say, when I was going through that, it was a tough time. There was a lot of people that discouraged me to get into flying, but I used my mentors and the positive people around me to not discourage me. And when I look at where the industry was then and where it was when I got hired at the airlines, it was a completely different industry. Everyone, when I got hired at Air Canada, everyone's like, wow, you are in the industry at the best time ever. There's record hiring. Pilots are making the most money that they've ever made, so on and so forth. And if I had gone with the negative that people told me back in 2003 when I started university and started flying training, I would have never got that. So hopefully that encourages people who are going through flight training right now. Even though the industry may look dark, there's a lot of growth that's coming. It's still a very, very exciting industry. So here's a little video. I'll let you watch and then I'll talk about it a little bit more. So that was me back in the military. I did that concurrently with my university education. So I started military in 2005, 2 years after university. And there's me on my basic flying training course on the Harvard 2, learning how to fly formation. So my formation partner was in the other airplane and he was filming me flying that. I don't know, how do you guys think I did flying next to another airplane? All right.
Demar, we have a question from Howard McDonald. He's asking
if
you've ever flown with the Snowbirds before.
Sorry, say that again?
If you've ever flown with the Snowbirds before.
Okay, so I've flown in, like in an airplane with the snowbirds, but being a member of the snowbirds, no, I was never a member of the snowbirds, but I had an opportunity to fly in the aircraft with them during their practice for the Hamilton Air Show a few years ago. And so yeah, so it's essentially what I'm doing there, but in a Tudor aircraft and a lot closer, a lot tighter, and a lot faster.
I have a question.
Yeah, man, go ahead.
So you were a part of the Air Force, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Say if I wanted to study in Canada, do I need to be a citizen of Canada to do that Air Force, to join the Air Force, or would a visa suffice?
So a visa wouldn't suffice. I think the minimum, and the requirements have changed, just to verify that information, but the minimum I believe is being landed immigrant. So to have that PR or permanent, no, either a PR card, which would be a permanent resident card. Sorry, go ahead.
So about the permanent resident thing, I think it's strictly only citizens, because I was looking to get into the Air Force as well, but they were telling me I can't apply because I'm a permanent resident. I'm not like a citizen. So
Okay,
I don't know if they changed it, but you can double check.
Yeah, double check, but I caution, here's the thing, I can tell you so many stories. I just caution some of the people at the recruiting center in that there's a lot of people in there that give a lot. I got so much false information. I would just get the information at like multiple sources, because there's a lot of people in there that don't know. Someone I know recently went there and they said that they could do, they could enroll them via a PR card, but there's certain process and forms that they would have to fill out. Typically, yes, it is citizens, but they've made some exceptions where you can go through a process to get through the Air Force with a PR card. Mind you, right now they're doing a lot of re-enrollment because there are pilots, say at like Air Canada, WESTJET, that are military, they've retired from the military, but seeing that they've been furloughed, they now want to go back temporarily until the industry picks up. So they're going to be spending a lot more time doing that. They're not really short of people. So when they're not really short of people, a lot of those exceptions are not really going to apply. Does that make sense?
Yeah, 100%.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yeah, man, go ahead.
So I just want to know simply, how are you able to continue college even though you started your military career? Is that something that they allow? Do they have like a program where you come in, you do your military training, or you come in the day and then you go to college, or are they that flexible?
So it is. So the program that I joined was the ROTP program, Regular Officer Training Plan. Under that program, you are specifically able to go to school during the year, and then you do military training on the off-school portion of the year. So university typically runs from September till April. So you do university from September to April, and then you do military training, whatever that training is. It could be your basic soldier, foot soldier training, because every officer has to do that. Your survival training, land survival, sea survival, your aeromedical training where you go in the hyperbaric chamber, all that training off school, like when you're not doing your school year, and then school through the rest. So that's how I was able to do them concurrently. They also have a program that's through Seneca College here in Canada, which is called CEOTP, Continuing Education Officer Training Plan. And through that, they've set up the program in such a way that you're able to do your Seneca degree program and then all the military stuff in between.
Oh, that's interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So can anyone guess what aircraft I'm standing on the wing of in this
Can I take a guess?
C-130J.
Here we go. There we
Holy.
go. There we go. Didn't even
Quick with the
hesitate.
draw.
Yeah, so it's a C-130J, and I'm in Little Rock, Arkansas in this picture. And that's where I did my initial training for the Hercules. When I started training on the Hercules, it was a brand new aircraft in Canada. So we hadn't had our training system wasn't set up yet. So I got to work with the United States Air Force, went through their training program, learned how to fly the Hercules there. And it was very exciting. Here's another picture of me beside the Herc. The Herc is a big proportioned airplane. Everything on it is big. So when you look at it from far, it kind of looks smaller, but when you stand up beside it, you can get a better idea of its size. So after the airlines, back in 2014, which was 3 years before I decided to leave, I had a plan to eventually be an airline pilot. When I joined the military was with the intent to retire to become an airline pilot. So I had no intention of staying in the military for an extended period of time. It was an option. And I said, if at the crossroads I wanted to stay, it gave me the option to stay. I alluded to this earlier, but there's a bit of a downturn in the industry right now, and it provides me an option as well. If I do get furloughed from my job, the military is an option for me to go back to. So I did like that security, and I did also like the fact that they paid for my flying training in university. So I got a scholarship there. So there's a lot of opportunities. It doesn't come for free. It does come with a price, but if you're flexible and you're willing to put that commitment in, the military is a great option for your flight training. So in 2014, I went and did my ATPL, which is my airline transport pilot's license. I wrote the exam in 2014, and that was setting me up for my transition over to the airlines. When I left in 2017, Air Canada wasn't hiring. So that was always my goal. My goal was Air Jamaica or Air Canada. Air Jamaica no longer exists, so Air Canada was where I wanted to go. So they weren't hiring when I wanted to, decided to leave the military. So I said, okay, what's the next best thing? Spoke to a mentor of mine, and he's like, if you want to get hired at any airline, go and work for their competitor. Those were his words exactly. They resonated with me. So I knew right then and there that I didn't want to go to Jazz. I didn't want to go to Sky Regional or anything affiliated with Air Canada. I wanted to go to a competitor, and that was WESTJET ENCORE. So went to WESTJET ENCORE, flew the Q400 there, had a blast. And as soon as Air Canada was hiring again and their application window was open, I applied. And I only spent about 7 months before I made the transition over to Air Canada. So I know a lot of people have this question. I get it all the time, so I'll answer it right now. People ask me, who do you work for? Do you work for Air Canada or do you work for Air Canada Rouge? And do Air Canada Rouge pilots get to fly Air Canada aircraft? Now, this is a complicated answer. So my employer is Air Canada. That is my mother employer. That's who I work for. That's what my paycheck says. It says Air Canada. Air Canada Rouge is a wholly owned subsidiary of Air Canada. Their pilots are Air Canada pilots. When they go to Rouge, they are working for a separate company. It's called a secondment. So you go over and you work for Rouge as a position. So it's just like if I fly the A320, I'm in a specific position, I'm locked in that position. I learned the A320, I fly the A320 at mainline, I'm an A320 pilot. When I go to Rouge, I'm at Rouge, which is a separate company, but it's just seen as a position, whether on the 6-7 or on the Airbus. I go there, I fly there, I'm locked there while I'm at Rouge. Anyone that goes from mainline over to Rouge has a 2-year commitment at Rouge before they're able to move back to mainline. But the short answer there is I work for Air Canada, seconded to Rouge. Air Canada Rouge pilots are Air Canada pilots. So here I am in this picture with Andre Blake. He's a captain, a fellow Jamaican. And yeah, it's great, you know, going and working with guys like this and people who are passionate about aviation. And truly, I do feel like this job is truly a dream job. Even with everything that's going on, I wouldn't want to do anything else. So I have a video coming up. I think I spoke too soon, but it's after this slide. I do have a video coming up. Just remind me if I forget to ask before I play the video, what airport I'm flying into. Anyway, so as I said, my office is the Airbus A320. As you see here on this is an actual picture of where I sit in the flight deck. I'm a first officer, so I sit on the right side of the airplane. If I was a captain, I would sit on the left side of the airplane. Another question I get asked all the time is, in the military, you sat in the left seat. In the airlines, you sit in the right seat. Why is that? That's because even though I was a captain of the previous company, when you get to an airline, you fall into their seniority system. I'm a junior pilot, still fairly new to Air Canada. I got there in March of 2018. So being a junior pilot, I am going to sit right seat until I'm senior enough to hold either a wide body first officer position or senior enough to hold a captain position on a narrow body. To give you some perspective on how that all looked, prior to COVID-19, I was showing on the bid list for left seat on the Airbus A320. If all had gone well, I would have been a captain around about now, but things change. I'm still in the right seat, probably going to be in the right seat for a few more years until the industry picks back up, but that's okay because I'm still having fun. So here's a video. Before I play it, can anyone guess just from looking at this clip what airport I'm going into? Don't all guess at once now.
Kingston Penn.
It's close.
That looks like Manly.
Manly, yes. So going into Kingston, it's a short 3.5 minute video, just of normal operation. I'm flying with Captain Andre Blake, and we're flying into Kingston, Norman Manley. Pay close attention because there will be a specific question at the end of this video.
Above. Minimum 200. $100. 50, 40, 30, 20. Retard, retard, retard.
slot.
It's auto.
Pax.
Packs are auto.
Equipment.
Sorry.
Crossplate.
Auto.
Beacon.
Sorry.
Stereo lights.
All right. So, can anyone guess the approach that I
ILS
was
1-2.
flying? No, not the ILS.
RNAV 1-2.
RNAV 1-2, yes, correct. Do you know how you'd be able to tell from the video that it was not the ILS?
If I saw your MD and your PFD, you or also if you didn't have landing system on, it would have been a RNAV, right?
Even easier than that. So I'll show you
on the top of the
approach
ND,
weights.
right?
Even easier than that. So this is the RNAV for 1-2, and the as you can see on this chart, it's heading 120, or it's a 120 track to the threshold of 1-2, which is pretty much aligned with the runway, whereas the ILS is offset. So
offset.
Coming in on the ILS, you can actually see you're on quite a bit of an angle compared to the RNAV, where you're straight on with the runway. So yeah, so that was in Jamaica. Very technical place to land. Kingston, if you were listening to the video, I said I got lucky there because it was a fairly smooth touchdown, but Kingston's a very technical place to land. Going from water to land, the winds are always strong over the water, and then they decrease over land. Anyone that flies into there probably knows everything here I'm talking about. And there's a slight upslope on the start of the runway, so it's a technical place to land. So whenever you get a nice smooth touchdown in there, it's always appreciated.
What aircraft was that? Was it the 21 or the 19?
It's funny because I posted some videos on Instagram, and some of the guys who are really into this, they can tell from the engines what airplane it was, but it was Airbus 321 going in there.
Wait, when was
so that was probably early this year, early 2020, going into there.
Yeah, there were lots of planes there. So
Yeah. Oh yeah, that was not any time.
not like that anymore.
No, not at all. So
Demar,
I'm gonna, yeah, man, go ahead.
I just wanted to know if you remember your first time flying into Jamaica for the first time, and if you could just touch briefly on what that experience was like, and yeah, pretty much what it was like to fly into Kingston or flying to Jamaica for the first time as an airline pilot.
Oh, yeah, I remember it was February, I think it was February 20th of 2019. That was my first time as an airline pilot into Jamaica, and it felt like, so you saw the picture there where Regin, you cry McCray, but you saw the picture there where I was this young little boy with a dream to become a pilot, and my family had the vision to allow us to move to North America. They wanted us to have the opportunities that were present in Canada to facilitate this dream of mine. I mean, it can be done anywhere, but they felt that it would have been great for me to travel to Canada to do that. And I was able to serve serve Canada in the military and do all that. And then here I am, full circle, flying back to Jamaica. So it was a very humbling, great experience to be able to have a dream and to kind of see it all the way to that end, and to be able to fly my people, back to my place of birth. So it's definitely a trip that I will never forget.
I got a question.
Nice.
Hello?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yes, as it pertains to the Air Cadet mentorship program, are you aware of any Air Cadet mentorship program? As well, you as a pilot, can you, or if you are you obliged to make any such inquiries to the board as it pertains to Air Cadet mentorship program? Because in the Caribbean especially, it is very limited for young individuals like us to be given such opportunities where we can be in that program, where we can get an adequate amount of training, being very much used to the advanced simulators that are well much more integrated. And we have to go either in North America, in Europe or Asia or Middle East to join such programs. And I'm really concerned about that. So I'm just asking you, are we of any such Air Cadet mentorship programs?
No, I'm not. I haven't done a lot of work with the Air Cadets. I am part of a mentorship program here in Canada. It's similar to the Aeronautical Club of the West Indies. It's called Urban Pilots Network, and that's keeping me busy right now. Actually, tomorrow we're going to a simulator, one of the jazz simulators with the kids, taking them in a full motion simulator. So I'm pretty pumped about that. You said something about obligation. There's no obligation for any pilot or any employee of Air Canada military to do any of this. And there's a lot of pilots, when they leave work, they don't want to talk about it. For me, I know what mentorship has done, and I know how critical it was in terms of me being able to achieve the goals that I've had up to this point. So that's why I advocate for it. I love what you guys do. That's why I participate in what you guys do. And I would like to see, more things being done to facilitate. Flying in general is a high barrier industry to get into. It's extremely expensive. Thankfully, I got my education paid for by the military. And some people are scared to enter this field because it's almost like mystical and mysterious. It's almost like a secret industry. You can't just go and see, touch, feel, be next to an airplane. You have to know someone in the industry. So this is why I advocate for mentorship. I love what the Aeronautical Club is doing, and that's why I support you guys. And I think we just all need to do more. And yeah, that's like, I guess what I want to say about that. Yeah, man.
You mentioned something about a club like this club, right?
Yes.
In Canada. Where in Canada are you located?
Toronto.
Oh, I'm in Ajax, so I mean, if
All
you
right.
guys have meetings or anything like that, or field trips or so, I can always get you up on Instagram or something.
Yeah, hit me up on Instagram. I'll give you the whole process, and then I can let you know how you can join and do all that stuff, and help out with summer camps and all that stuff, the things that we do. Because I mean, that's how we make it in this industry. We're almost non-existent. They talk about women in aviation, and I want to promote that. Black people in aviation is very low. And then Black women in aviation is almost like a unicorn. So we need to do more to advocate for people succeeding in aviation. So everything that, supports that, I'm all for it.
Another question as well. Due to the crisis we are going through right now, like due to such airlines and the fleets that they have, do it affect you pilots? Like if you specified at such fleet, like for example, you're flying the A320 and they go on reserve, like they are not being used. Does that really affect you guys? Like it push back you guys in terms of the workforce, and guys not going to really use the fleet that much?
Yeah, so it does affect us. We're a little bit more complicated in that we're a seniority-based company and we have a very mixed fleet. So seniority plays into this because usually, and I say that loosely because there was a lot of junior people that were flying, junior first officers flying big metal like 777s, 787s. But usually senior people fly big airplanes like 787, 777. And junior people like myself fly smaller aircraft, single aisle aircraft like the 320, 737, so on. So now with COVID-19, there's been a lot of airplanes that are removed from the fleet, or they're put into storage. So it does affect those fleets. Like Rouge, no Rouge flying. So all the Rouge pilots right now, like myself, I transferred over to mainline on the same airplane. So my training was quick, but there's some people that have transferred to 330 or that have transferred to 777. They now have to go on a course, and they have to be sequenced for that course. They got to figure out the logistics of how many of those aircraft are left. So as you see, it gets extremely complicated. If a lot of the junior guys end up leaving based on furloughs, then what happens is something called a downbid. So you would have guys that are maybe on a 787 that are senior, and I say typically because there are exceptions to this, that would now have to get downgraded to a smaller airplane in the fleet, and they'd have to be retrained on that airplane, and everyone gets pushed down until all the junior people are replaced, and then all the senior people are on their new airplanes. So it's a big utilization game and way above my pay grade, but that's kind of how it works. So let me talk about some of this Airbus stuff, because I know you'll have some more questions. Sorry, go ahead.
One last question, if you don't mind.
Yeah, no worries.
About that flight there, is that a turnaround flight that you did, or did you get to spend like a night in Kingston after that flight?
All of the Rouge flying and mainline picking up the Rouge flying right now, it's all turns. We used to have some overnights in Kingston, but based on the route structure of Kingston and how they operate the density, I think they do like 5 or 6 times a week at peak. So they have one flight in, one flight out. That's for Jamaica. Some of the other islands like Barbados, St. Lucia, some of the places in the Dominican, Mexico, all over the Caribbean. There's some places in there that we do layovers, but based on the route structure for Kingston, there are no layovers that are set up. But we can get what they call impromptus.
Is it really hard to do those turnarounds? Like, is it tiring to do turnaround flights, or is it nothing much?
Nah, that's the
wait, but
thing.
I'm sorry, you're flying an Airbus. it's not hard.
No. Hey, watch what you say, man. Watch what you say.
It does it all for you.
So no, it's great. I love it. I love those trips, and you'll see, Roderick and I, we talk about this all the time, but when you get to the airline level and the amount of flying and amount of turns that you do, you will come to appreciate airplanes that do what they do well. When I was on the Q400, even though it's a more junior airplane, was a lot more exhausting to fly 5 legs a day, even if I was spending a shorter day, than doing one takeoff, one landing at the destination, and doing another takeoff landing at your arrival when you get back at the end of the day. So the turn in itself is great. So, and the Airbus 320 is a fantastic airplane. So it's great to fly. So I'll get into the Airbus here a little bit because I know there'll be a lot of questions. I fly the Airbus A320. Little bit about that. You can see the charts here. It's 123 feet long, and it has, as you can see here as well, it has a wingspan just under 112 feet, sorry, and a tail that's just under 40 feet high. Remember those dimensions because you'll see something here as well. So the Airbus A320 was introduced in service in 1988, and then Airbus decided to stretch the model later on, and they came out with the Airbus A321. And if you look at this, you'll see that this is 146 feet long, has about the same height and tail, just under 40 feet. And the wingspan is identical, just under 112 feet to the Airbus A320. So what happens, you have this same wing dimensions as a smaller airplane. The Airbus A321 is what we call a stubby winged airplane. And because of that, it has some climb limitations, especially out of Jamaica, hot environment, heavy loaded. There are times when we get up into the mid-20s where we're not climbing as fast as everyone else. But out of all of them, this is my favorite airplane to fly. And then in 1996, Airbus introduced the A319, and as you can see here again, same wingspan, same tail. Just with this airplane, it's 111 feet long. So now you have the same airplane, same wing dimensions on a smaller or lighter airplane. The A319 is one of the best performing airplanes out of all of them. So really no performance issues at all when it comes down to the A319. And just to give you an idea of the differences in size, our smallest or least gross takeoff weight A319 has a maximum takeoff weight of about 70,000 kilograms. For all of those that don't use kilograms, about 154,000 pounds. And the heaviest takeoff weight for 321 is about 206,000 pounds, 93.5 kilograms. So there's a big weight difference between the 319 and the 321. And you'll notice this from Rouge, this is a 321 as well. They're newer, and they, instead of having the wing fences on them, they have something called SHARKLETS. And with this, we did get a little bit of increase on the wingspan. So instead of the 112 feet, we now have about 118 foot wingspan, and it is noticeable. These 321s compared to the mainline ones climb so much better, and they're just a dream to fly. I really love them. The guys who have flown the 330 say that this airplane flies almost identical to the 330. What's nice? Sorry, go ahead.
I have a question about, you said they have SHARKLETS?
Yeah, SHARKLETS.
Those are the wingtips?
Yeah, it's the Airbus term for winglets.
Oh, because
So
Boeing
these things
trademarked it or something? Oh wait, and then you said
no,
they were
no.
Oh, it
No,
doesn't
Boeing
matter.
didn't trademark them. Yeah, they just called them SHARKLETS. Yeah.
Wait, where they replace it? You said some. Did you say wing fences?
Yeah, so the Airbus 320 family has wing fences just on the end of each wing, instead of having the SHARKLETS. SHARKLETS are much better performing wing. They're able to reduce induced drag a lot more.
The wing fences at the tip of the wing, right?
Yeah.
Aren't the wing fences to disrupt the spanwise component of airflow?
That too.
Yeah, it does, but the thing is, so I'm not an Airbus engineer, but if you look at the Airbus A321 and you were supposed to look at the lift coefficient of the SHARKLETS versus the wing fences, you get a much better component of lift based on having the SHARKLETS in place than the wing fences. The airflow is a lot less disrupted, because now instead of you having this turbulent air that's on the upper and lower portion of the wing at the wing fences, the induced drag is being brought up to the top tip of the SHARKLET, and it's creating a lot less drag profile. So you get a lot more efficient lifting wing.
Okay, but
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Can you go back to the 319 diagram a bit?
Okay, hold on. Now you're asking me to do stuff that I have to. Okay, hold on a second here. There we go.
All right, so this is a 319, right? So for many persons,
yes, sir,
really recognize the difference between airplanes in general and then Airbus planes. What I normally do, right? The emergency exit there, right, over the wing.
Yes.
So these planes have one.
Yes, that's correct. One on each side.
Yeah. Hopefully you can answer this question.
Yes, sir.
In Jamaica days, they had a A319 that had two. So persons know they know which aircraft I'm talking about. So there are two. So why did that one have two, or why some A319s have two?
Wow. You know what? That's a good one. I think that's one for Google. But the thing is, when you have a certain capacity on an airplane, you're required to have a certain amount of exits. So was it a higher density configuration airplane? Do you know?
Could I answer?
Yes, Chris.
What happens with aircraft manufacturers, such as the A320, the 319, the 321, and so on? They would design a specific aircraft, such as the 320, and then they would crop them, cut piece off, and make it smaller, and call it a 319, or they would add a section of the fuselage and call it 321.
Yes.
So what you would find, the original design may have 2 exits, but as they then make that a model by itself, when they redesign it to make it, to rather optimize it for operation, they would then add or subtract things that would reduce the weight and increase the efficiency. And then it will become the 319 serial number such and onwards would have certain things.
I like that answer, because even with our airplanes, we have differences cards, because Airbus, it's almost like Tesla. They're constantly, so you take something like the 320, they're constantly evolving it over time. So they've made improvements in different systems and buttons and switches, and so things progress and change over time. Because we have some 319s, their maximum takeoff weight 70,000 kilograms, and then we also have some that are 75.5. Just based on improvement in the landing gear and whatnot, they're able to increase their maximum takeoff weight. And so on and so forth, just in terms of what uses green hydraulic for a certain system, what uses yellow hydraulic. I'll talk about some of that stuff later on in the presentation, but I really do like that answer for sure. All right, so keeping going here, let me just move down. So that's a 321 with Sharklets. Okay, so since everyone here is ready to cut up Airbus, what features do you think make Airbus unique?
I can take a guess.
The side stick for sure.
Okay, side stick.
The flight laws, normal, alternate, and direct.
Okay.
Could you repeat the question?
Right on the screen there. What features make Airbus unique?
Fly-by-wire. It was the first
Fly-by-wire?
commercial aircraft to pioneer, I think,
Yeah,
non-direct.
that's right. Yeah, digital fly-by-wire was pioneered on the Airbus A320.
For commercial operation. For commercial operation.
For commercial operation, that's correct.
Yeah, there were other manufacturers and developers in the military and commercial who had it before Airbus, but they were the first to certify.
Yes, that's correct.
One of the fundamental things we must remain to do is to give these youngsters as accurate information as possible, because we try to avoid them going out there to sound or to speak and then be someone to judge them as, hey, you're wrong. Where do you learn this? At Aeronautical Club? No, that's wrong. So let's try to give them as close as possible to the accurate information.
I heard it's more maintenance friendly, but personally I haven't worked on them before.
No, not maintenance friendly. It's
that's
more
that's what I heard. Somebody said that to me still.
No, it's pilot friendly. Besides, they spend 20 hours in it anyway per day. So, I mean.
Anything else, guys?
All right, I see some questions in the chat, but I think I'll just take one. All right,
okay,
so
go ahead.
Your seniority is based off your date of hire. I think.
So yes and no. Yes and no. Seniority is based on, and this is modern times because they've changed the system over the years. So when you get hired, before you could get a seniority number and you could hold it. Now what they've done is when you get hired, you don't get a seniority number, but you get a pool of numbers when you show up to what you call your pilot indoctrination course. And then those numbers are put into a hat, and literally they're drawn out of a hat. So the difference between, and my class was a class of 40. So the difference between myself, which I pulled number 7 out of 40 on that class, and the last guy was based totally on a random system. Any other questions before I go on?
You can continue until we get.
Okay, so I heard a lot of things mentioned there. So we talked about side stick. We talked about digital fly-by-wire. And we also talked about some of the flight laws. So yeah, that sounds fairly typical. I'll mention a few more, but we will get into some of those. So the thing is, I know we talked about the information here being accurate. I'm an Airbus pilot, certified. This is what I do day in, day out. But this aircraft is very complex. So, and I don't want to make it too technical. There could be things that I miss. I'm not perfect. So if there's any information that you find that's wrong or inaccurate, just let me know. I'm easy to correct. And don't use this information to operate an aircraft, because this is not, it's not a ground school. The Airbus A320 is very similar in operation to what I'd say Apple. And I'm not knocking Boeing, but Boeing would be a lot similar to Android. And we're talking about an airplane that was designed in the 1980s that has features that some Boeing aircraft like the 737 don't even have in their airplanes. So let's talk about the side stick and the flight control laws, because that is almost, I would say that is the backbone of how this airplane operates. So I don't know your name, but you mentioned the flight laws.
I think
so.
Yeah.
What's your name, sorry?
Jafaz.
Jafaz, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so you mentioned the flight laws. So do you know how the flight laws are managed on the Airbus?
I think so. I think it's like normal is when all of your systems are working.
Before you even go to that, have you heard about the flight computers on the Airbus?
Like the ADIRUs and stuff like that?
No, not even that complex. Okay, so there's 7 flight control computers on the Airbus A320. There's 2 ELACs. So ELAC stands for Elevator Aileron Computer. 3 SECs. So before I go to that, so the 2 aileron elevator aileron computers, their primary function is just what it sounds like. And then you have 3 SECs, which are spoiler elevator computers. And their primary are the spoilers, secondary elevators. And then you have 2 flight augmentation computers, and those are able to assist with flight augmentation, such as the rudder and the yaw on the airplane. And so the airplane is fully fly-by-wire with a mechanical rudder that is augmented with the 2 FACs on the airplane. As mentioned, Airbus pioneered the digital fly-by-wire in commercial aircraft. Can anyone tell me why or what advantages you have to having a fly-by-wire aircraft? Because we heard that it's not maintenance friendly. It is a harder airplane to fix. It's more complicated to fix. So why go down this route of having a fly-by-wire aircraft? What would you say are some of the advantages?
Save weight.
Mm-hmm.
Save weight, okay. What else?
It's easier for the, we're having to use physical strength is concerned, where you have to be fighting the winds and fighting different conditions. It's easier to operate.
Okay. I'll take one more. I'll take one more before the question.
Oh,
one more before the question.
Does it reduce pilot workload or something like that?
Yeah, it reduces pilot workload. Don't forget your question, Jafaz. It reduces pilot workload. And so I'll add to that is that there's a similar feel across varying weights. So I mentioned that I fly all 3, and there's another one, there's an A318 that I didn't mention. I don't fly the A318, but all of the A318, 319, 320, 321 are all under the same EA32 rating. So you can fly all of them. And at Air Canada, when I was, prior to going to Rouge and when I was at Air Canada mainline, I would fly 4 legs a day. 2 legs could be on a 320, 1 on a 319, and then the last one on a 321. So I could have multiple legs with different aircraft. With the fly-by-wire system, other than, yes, it does feel a little bit different and reacts slightly different, but you get a very similar feel across varying weights. And you also have commonality across all of the Airbus fleet. So any of the modern Airbus, so we're talking anything 320, when I say 320, I'm talking 318 and onward, all of those airplanes, they operate using the same principle. So if I went into 380, even though I may not understand all the 380 systems, it operates very similar to a 320, and the same with the 330 and a 350. So you have that commonality, which really saves training. So you decrease your training costs. Jafaz, go with your question before we go through some of the disadvantages.
So say like you're at cruise and you press the red button on the side stick to disconnect the autopilot and you're in normal law. Will the plane maintain its pitch for you and everything?
Yes, absolutely, it will.
So you don't have to touch anything and it maintains everything for you?
Okay, I'm gonna talk fully about the side stick and what it all does, but essentially it's something called a vector stabilized platform. So with that, wherever you point the aircraft within certain limitations is where it will maintain 1G trim and stay there. So it's a completely different way of flying the aircraft.
So does it feel weird flying that coming from other planes?
Oh, absolutely. Because when you bank and you let go, it will maintain the bank as long as you're less than 33 degrees. You bank to 25 degrees and you let go, it will maintain that. So it's different. And I know you're getting into it, but the side stick, and it's coming in other slides. I'll actually wait till the other slides where I'll get a little bit more in detail in terms of how that operates. But some of the disadvantages, can anyone tell me some of the disadvantages about having a full fly-by-wire airplane like this? We talked about some of them.
I know one disadvantage to be that what you're doing, let's say what you're doing on the first officer side, there is no identical movement on the captain side. So one has to remain, one has to maintain their situational awareness during operation, because they don't have that cue that, hey, we're in a left bank now just by looking at the side stick. So that could be one disadvantage if one isn't really paying attention to what they're doing.
Yeah, so when the other pilot is flying, for sure, the controls aren't backfed. So whatever is being done on one side, you have no idea what the other person is doing with their controls. And the same with the autopilot on. When the autopilot's on, the side stick locks into place. So when the autopilot is making inputs, you don't know, other than looking at what's happening with the airplane, you don't know those inputs. So that is definitely a disadvantage. What I found was difficult, especially coming from the Hercules Q400, is there's no feel on the stick. Yes, it's a robust stick. It's the best joystick you'll ever use in your life. It is super well made, but it has no feel from outside. So the effect of the wind, the effect of the weight, because it trims for you, you know, the effect of if you're going fast or slow, you're not feeling any of that on the stick. So I found it, for me, I had to change my technique in terms of how I flare and how I land, because there's no feel on the stick. The other disadvantage is that you need to have an extremely thorough understanding of how this airplane operates in order to fly it. Because if you don't understand what the airplane, what mode it's in and what it's doing, it will get you into trouble very, very fast. As an aside, when you're coming in for an approach in an Airbus A320, you need to, if you're not in navigation mode, you need to do something called arm the approach. And when you arm the approach, you're taking the aircraft out of descent mode and you're putting it into approach mode. If you don't do that and you are you go and you go to from selected speed to manage speed, and say you have flaps at 2, and the flaps speed for flap 2 in an A320 is 200 knots. So say you have flaps 2 and you're at 190 knots, and you push the speed button to give the speed control to the aircraft. It will accelerate to 250 knots and overspeed those flaps, and you will have absolutely no idea why it just did that. But that's because if you don't RB approach mode, the plane thinks, oh, you're below 10,000 feet, you push manage, you want 250 knots. So there's things like that. You have to have a very thorough understanding of how this aircraft works in order to operate it. So, and as we also mentioned, it's very expensive to fix because there's a lot of boxes and computers associated, and I'm not a maintenance person, but also very technical to fix as well. So Jafaz seems to be the Airbus expert here. Can you name the 5 flight control laws that are on the Airbus?
There's 5? Wait, is this like the normal alternate and direct stuff?
Yeah, so that's 3.
I don't know the other 2.
Don't know the other 2? Okay, so you have normal law. So normal law, that's where we operate most of the time. That's full protection. You have alternate law, where you could lose some protection. Direct law, where it's the most sensitive, insane airplane to fly. It's all direct control inputs at that point. Then you have something called mechanical backup. Have you heard of that one before?
Mechanical reversion. Mm-hmm.
Have you heard of that?
Yeah, I heard of that.
Okay, so that is just based on you having control of the rudder and the trimmable horizontal stabilizer, THS, and your thrust. Everything else doesn't have any input. So that's just a very degraded mechanical backup. And then from normal operation, if you have an upset where you exceed certain limitations, so if you exceed from an external source, so this would have to be from turbulence or a wind gust or something outside of the airplane, because the airplane won't put itself into any of these attitudes, you would get into something called abnormal attitude law. So that's triggered with an upset, and there's very specific parameters of overspeed, underspeed, pitch, and bank that would trigger you to go into abnormal attitude law. And that now then gives the flight control laws the ability to recover from that upset, because if they remained in normal or alternate law, you wouldn't be able to recover. So the abnormal attitude law gives you the ability to recover. So those are the 5 flight control laws in the Airbus. Normal laws where we stay the majority of the time, all the time, all normal operations, normal law, easy to remember. With normal law, we have 6 protections. Can anyone name what those 6 protections are?
I'd say overbanking.
Okay, so what would you call that? Roll protection?
Right. Sounds about right.
Airspeed protection.
Roll.
Yeah, overspeed.
Okay, so high speed protection and low speed protection. Would you say both of those?
Protection. I don't want to say stall protection.
So even better, simplify it, high AOA protection.
So since there's roll protection, is there a pitch protection?
There is a pitch protection. So I think we got all of them. So there's pitch, there's roll, low speed, high speed. One that we missed was load factor. So there's a load protection. So in normal clean configuration, we're limited to 2G positive and -1 negative. When you have any configuration that involves flaps, you're limited to 2G and 0. So those are the 6 protections that are on the Airbus A320. Roderick, what do you think about this airplane now? Still don't like it?
I'm getting there.
All right, there we go. So in normal law, we have 3 sub-operating modes. So you have all those flight control laws, and then in normal law, if you want to put this in a sub-bracket to normal law, we have ground mode, we have flight mode, and we have flare mode. I'm going to default to Jafaz because he seems to. Do you fly an Airbus? What's your background?
I'm 15. I can't fly here.
How do you know all of this stuff?
I know a guy who flies Airbus on my flight sim. I talk to him sometimes. He told me I fly in flight sim on VATSIM.
Okay.
I was flying an Airbus, and I came from a 737 on flight sim, and he's type rated in it, and he spent like 5 hours with me showing me everything. So
5 hours, and you learned everything.
I learned a lot from him.
Okay. So do you know about these 3 submodes, ground, flight, and flare?
I know flare mode is where the THS automatically trims for you, right?
So the THS is always trimming for you. So I'll explain. So ground mode, so you were asking about the stick. That's why I was going to just give you a brief overview of that. So in ground mode, the stick is just like any other airplane. So you pull back, it moves the elevator up, push forward, moves the elevator down, left, right, ailerons, some spoiler deflection, and then it just works like that, just like a conventional control. In flight mode, now this is where things start to transition. So in 0.5 seconds from when you rotate, the airplane stops being conventional in the pitch arena. So instead of that pulling back on the stick, moving your elevator, all that's doing right now is commanding load. If you pull it back more, you're commanding more load. Push forward less load. So you're just operating the load factor on the airplane. If you want aggressive onset of 2G, you pull back all the way to the stop. You're not going to stall the airplane. You're just going to command an aggressive 2G. If you want to command an aggressive negative 1G, you push aggressive on the stick. And then over 5.5 seconds after you leave the ground, the ailerons transition from being normal ailerons into being rate controller. So you're no longer commanding an aileron position with left and right, you're commanding a roll rate. In normal law, and all the different laws have different rates, direct law, the stops on the ailerons is about 33 degrees per second. In normal law, if you go all the way to the stops, you're commanding about 15 degrees per second roll rate, not the position of the ailerons. Now, because the airplane flies like this and you only have to trim the THS on the ground, it would be extremely difficult to land. So they introduced something called flare mode. So flare mode is triggered when you hit 50 feet. The airplane takes a snapshot of the attitude. So it takes a picture of where you are with the attitude. And then over an 8-second period, it trims the nose down 2 degrees. At 30 feet, it starts doing that process. So then it gives you the normal sensation to want to flare the aircraft. It took a long time for me to learn how to land this aircraft because of how these modes operate. In a crosswind, typically you'd cross control to straighten up the airplane when you're doing like a cross-wind landing. In an Airbus, if you try to put cross control inputs in, you'll just continually roll the wing into the ground. So there's differences in terms of how you operate the aircraft. In a crosswind takeoff with the Airbus, in a normal airplane, you get your control inputs into the wind and whatnot. With an Airbus, you can put a little bit of control, but you have to watch because too much control is going to induce spoiler deflection, and you don't want to do that. So typically for a low crosswind or tailwind, you're going to put for low crosswind, you're going to put half deflection down. For any tailwind or heavy crosswind, you're going to put full deflection down on the nose. And all that's doing is commanding how aggressive the nose is being planted to the ground to help with some of that crosswind control input. Any questions on that before we go to the next slide?
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
When did you say this plane was made?
So the first flight was in, or the first service was in 1988 with Air France.
1988.
Yes.
Wow. And it's that advanced?
It's extremely advanced. And that's what I'm saying. And that's what I'm saying. When you really understand how this airplane operates and you understand it through and through, it is literally the most beautiful airplane to fly, hands down. It is incredible.
I keep thinking that's from the 2000s because my favorite thing from like the 1990s is the Toyota Supra, but I guess it's the Airbus now. That is crazy.
Yeah, it's a nice airplane. So I talked a lot about these things, but I'll just kind of go through. Yeah, man, go ahead.
What operating system does the Airbus computer use?
Windows 10.
Operating system. That's funny.
Windows XP. You turn it on and you see the Windows XP screen.
No idea, but they're able to do all this with very little computing power.
Logic gates.
So,
DOS.
Who said that?
I said that.
Okay.
I said I didn't hear it clearly.
Oh, I said logic gate. DOS operating system.
Oh.
It's the same system used in the B-52 and the stealth bombers. It was designed the decade before. So basically how it operates, it reads parameters and it reads all these parameters and it has different parameters open different gates that send different signal. A simple example is the automatic brakes when landing.
Yes.
So when the pilot engages landing mode in the aircraft, the throttle is set to idle or landing speed. The flaps is full. The computer says, oh, the flaps is full. Oh, I'm at landing power, I must be landing. Then the airspeed reduces to about 160 knots. It says, yes, I'm landing. And the minute the wheel touch the ground and the weight of wheel on the ground, the computer says, oh, 4 signals, flap, brakes. And then when the brakes is deployed, the next computer says, shit, remember spoiler, boom, spoiler up. So it's simply
the thing is the spoiler, the auto brake function is a direct logic to the spoiler operation. So the spoilers deploy and then the brakes deploy. Okay.
I'm not an Airbus guy, but anything with wings and engine I fix.
So, yeah. So yeah, no, that's right. Like there's very specific parameters. The Airbus is forgiving in that sense is that if you, for whatever reason, forgot to arm the spoilers on landing, as soon as you have weight on wheels, as soon as one of the throttles, at least one of the throttles is at idle, and then at least one throttle goes into reverse, the spoilers will come out automatically. So it's advanced in that respect to really to protect you in some situations. Because I mean, no spoiler deployment on a contaminated runway, especially when you're operating in Canada, yeah, it could be detrimental. But Airbus builds in protections to help in terms of those operations.
I have a really dumb question to ask.
It's no dumb questions.
All right. So to like behind all of this, is there like a CPU with 1 million transistors or something that's dealing with this, or is it, do you have like an Intel CPU running this, or is it some special like logic DOS kind of computer down there, or is it?
Yeah,
like
there's layers of computers on computers that are going through a centralized system that are taking all these control inputs and deciding what's going on with the aircraft. Because even like the landing gear has an LGCIU, landing gear interface control unit. The spoilers and flaps have a separate computer that talks to, the central computer. All those computers we talked about, the ELACs, the SECs, the FACs, they're all talking. So they're all processing. In terms of what that's called, I've never gone that deep into that operation, but if anyone can answer that, I don't know. What the specific name or program is, other than what was mentioned with the gate system.
And how do you feel like with the new CPUs we're getting and things like that? I don't know if you're into computers. Are you?
Enough.
Like, about like the new Ryzen CPUs and things like that with like millions of cores and things like that. Do you think this could have any benefit to planes like Airbus planes to add way more computing power and make them do even better things?
Okay, so I did an automation study when I was in university, and it all comes down to human-machine interface, right? The automated part of flying is not new. You know that auto land systems existed on British-built aircraft in the late 1960s that could land an ILS. So yeah, absolutely.
Wow.
So now the technology changes to make things more efficient and smooth, but you have to remember the human component. Unless you're removing the human from the system, you have to make sure that the system and the human can operate in, you know, unison. So yes, there's a lot of automated things that airplanes can do. I didn't get too much into it because I don't want to go too deep, but Airbus has their new program that the airplane, once you power it up, is able to roll down the runway, rotate, take off on its own, and to land at a non-ILS runway on its own. But how you integrate that technology, you have to think about the human component, unless you're removing the human from that component.
Do you think they'll do that?
It's here's the thing. Flying the airplane, I mean, if a non-rated Airbus pilot got an airplane, they would crash and die. Like, flying the airplane is not as easy as some people think. If you're trained, you can do it. But at the end of the day, flying is not the hard part of my job. The hard part of my job is decision making, figuring out how to operate the airplane within rules, regulations, thinking about the customer service side and whatnot. So there's so many components to the job, and interpreting rules and regulations to operate within those rules and regulations, that removing the human is so much more than the operation. This airplane at 100 feet can fly on autopilot, and I can disconnect the autopilot at minimums. So then why am I still in the system other than taxiing the airplane? You know, why do they pay pilots to do that? Because they're the decision-making component. And as you can see, when some of this stuff falls off, the redundancies start to fall off. When your auto thrust system doesn't work, when your side stick is limited, when you are an alternate law or direct law, the computers they're not able to process that. And you're a computer guy, can you program all the permutations to come up with all the decision-making trees that are associated with every single scenario that you could come across? So you'd need an artificial intelligent component where you have extreme machine learning. So now where the airplane is able to see a situation, learn and adapt, and continuously learn and adapt. And we're not there yet.
Yeah. That's really interesting. It's great philosophy.
Yeah, no worries. So the side stick operation is dependent on the control law, the flight control law that we talked about, and the specific sub mode. A lot of pilots that come from other airplanes, they tend to over control the Airbus because they're flying it. Whereas with the Airbus, it's the less you touch this stick, the better, because literally you're vector stabilized. You point the aircraft to where you want to go, and it goes. So say for instance, if I decided I'm going to roll all the way to the left, the airplane will stop at 67 degrees. I can continue pushing left, it's going to stop at 67 degrees. If I'm not in any of the flight protection modes and I let go of the stick, it's going to automatically roll back to 33 degrees in any regime of flight. That's what it's going to do. If for whatever reason I'm in a clean configuration, I pull all the way back on the stick, it's going to start at 30 degrees. As you start to slow down, it will come down to 25 degrees and it will stay there all day. If I pitch forward on the stick all the way, it's going to go to 15 degrees and it's going to stay there all within parameters. And that's the beauty of how this side stick works. So we talked about normal law. We talked about ground mode, flight mode, which is protected, the vector stabilized, and then flare mode. So we talked about all of those things there. Jafaz, you're all over it, so I'm going to ask you again, or anyone that wants to take a stab at this. What do you think the red button does on the side stick?
Eject.
Eject.
Autopilot disengage.
Okay, that's one of the things.
Eject the pilot from the plane.
To allow conversations between the tower and the pilot or first officer.
To download the conversation?
No,
Sorry, I didn't hear.
No, it's like it's the button where you can talk to the tower, basically.
Nope, that's not that one. The red button, no, the red button doesn't do that.
Master disengage switch.
So the autopilot disconnect is one of the things. So along those lines, it is a priority button. So we talked about the controls not being fed, back-fed from what the other pilot's doing. So if the captain's flying or any pilot's flying, you don't like what the other guy is doing, you push that button and hold it with the autopilot off, and it will say, if you're sitting in the right seat as a first officer, it will say priority right. That means now you've momentarily locked out the other control. So that control no longer does anything for the time being. If for whatever reason, say that person's incapacitated, they've fallen on the stick, they're doing something with the stick that you don't like and you don't want to keep holding that button for too long, you hold it for at least 30 seconds and then it will permanently but temporarily disengage the other stick. So then you can let go of that button, the other guy can use his button, you'll see some flashing lights in front of you telling you that he's using the button, but it won't, the other stick won't do anything. If he now comes back, sorry, go ahead.
Right. So that kind of it makes me wonder, right? Let's say somebody wants to do some not so great things with the airplane deliberately. This may be a security question, but let's say somebody wants to take control of the aircraft away from you and go and fly off in a building or something, and they want to use that feature to lock you or lock the other pilot out of whatever it is that the airplane is doing. Is there a way that that pilot who is locked out, is there a way that they can get back in to the system?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
Okay.
So they'd have to just press any of the those buttons again, and then it will put the other control back into you. So it's permanent for as long. Well, I shouldn't say permanent. It will lock the other guy or other person out of the system until there's a change. So the button's pressed again. Then you have control of the button again. In terms of that question, you know what, man? We had German wings, but German wings was an anomaly. The preservation of life. I've not met a pilot that doesn't want to live. You want to survive. And for the people who are not pilots, number one, they don't know about this stuff. You'd have to be versed on Airbus, like deep into Airbus to understand how to lock someone out. And that cockpit door is severely guarded, severely. So there's a lot of barriers before you get to the stick.
I gotcha.
So like, say if you're flying for Air Canada Rouge and someone goes rogue, they can't really do much. Like the other pilot who's not rogue can stop them.
Yeah, and I mean all of our pilots, I mean, are sane, sound, love life. We want to live. There's no one that wants to do that stuff. It's preservation of life. I want to live as much as I know the passengers want to live, and we take pride in operating safely.
Can I say something?
Sorry, there was a question.
I have a question.
I just wanted to say that with regards to the German wings accident, just remember that the pilot was alone in the cockpit when he did that. He locked out the captain out of the cockpit. So that's
exactly. And we have we have ways to get in if someone locks us out. So they've moved forward from that situation.
Yeah, it still takes 30 seconds.
Yeah. we don't want to tell people that though.
My question is, another question. Are you confirming that with Airbus, the computer flies the plane and not the pilot?
Yes. The computer controls the airplane, unless you're not in normal or alternate law. If you're in direct law, then you're directly flying the airplane. Other than that, you're flying the airplane through the fly-by-wire system and all the flight computers.
Basically, you ask the computer for a situation, and then the computer then decides whether it will give you it or not.
Exactly.
So if you say, I want to turn 90 degrees to the left, the computer will give you 62, you said?
So you want to roll 90 degrees to the left? You mean roll?
Yeah,
roll 90
roll,
degrees?
sorry. Roll.
Yeah. Yeah, so if you want to roll, say if you wanted to roll more than 67 degrees to the left, you'd have to be in a mode other than normal law in order to achieve it.
Okay, I'm just confirming because, you know, just trying to figure out if it's one of the planes where the computer can take over and say goodbye.
No, there was something in our books prior to if you had like an uncommanded pitch, if like say the computers were receiving erroneous information, and there's a way that we can put it into alternate law, and then we would be able to override that. So there is override function, but the software logic has been fixed, so that is no longer even an anomaly on the fleet.
Are you able to enter alternate law by pressing a button or no?
Yeah, there's some buttons that we can press to force it into alternate law.
What are those buttons?
For another conversation.
Oh, I wanted to test it on my flight sim.
Yeah, we can talk after.
All right.
Okay, so in the interest of time, there's a few more slides left, and we have a question section at the end.
Yeah, so you want me to just keep going? Okay, I'll push through. So, fun fact here, the Airbus A320 has a horn. So this little button right here, it's the mechanic switch. If you push that, there's a sound, audible sound, so you're able to alert the ground crew. So if you can't get their attention, you can push that. But Canadians were so polite, very few people that I've seen actually use that.
Does it sound like a normal car horn?
No, not even, just like a low little. The other thing that I really like a lot about the Airbus A320 or Airbus family is the overhead panel and the dark cockpit feature. So right now you can see that there's lighted switches on the panel, but that means that there's a switch that's either off or that's commanded into a position other than its normal operating position, or it's a switch that requires your attention. So if everything is dark, we say in Airbus, well, we don't say, this is kind of a colloquialism, black is beautiful. So dark cockpit means that everything is set up the way that you need it to be and that you want it to be. In this, we're on the ground, the fuel pumps are off. You can see the generators are online, the APU bleed's on, the APU master is on. So this would not be a normal flight configuration. That's why you have lights on the panel. Auto thrust system, we talked briefly about that. So the auto thrust system on the airplane, unlike Boeing that is back-fed, where you get that tactical feel as the thrust comes up and comes down, in the Airbus, the thrust levers with the auto thrust system, they don't move. Typical operation for this airplane, when you take off, you're either taking off in this detent, which is the Flex MCT detent, or the toga detent, and literally it's click here, it's a free motion here, click into this position, click to this position, and if you're going to toga, you'd click to that position. So typical takeoff, you'd click all the way up, so it'd be 2 clicks, click through climb, click through Flex MCT, you have something set in the MCDU, then it would rate the thrust based on what you have set there for an assumed temperature. And then when you get to your thrust reduction altitude, you bring the thrust levers back to climb. You leave them in climb until you are just about to flare. It says retard, that's reminding you to retard the throttles. You bring the throttles or the thrust levers back to 0. That's turning the auto thrust system off. And then on the ground between 0 here and climb, it operates just like a normal throttle. So there are some features that are built into the auto thrust system. And like I mentioned, you can operate them either automatic or in manual mode. The only thing is if you're operating it in the manual mode, you'd be before this detent. So in this range here, throttle works just like any other throttle system that you're used to, and even for reverse. And if you're in this detent with 2 engines, that's for the auto thrust system. If you lose an engine, then one of the thrust levers needs to be in flex MCT. And with the Airbus, someone said that the computer is always knowing what's going on in the Airbus, and that's correct. Even with the auto thrust system, it has underlying features. If you ever get too slow in the airplane says, you're too slow, I don't like what you're doing, and it will go into something called alpha floor. Yeah, there you go. So we'll go into alpha floor, and that will command thrust to get you out of that situation. If the airplane, if you get too slow and the airplane knows that it's in a high AOA situation and it knows that you can't fix the situation with pitch alone, it says speed, 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 and that tells you that you need to increase the thrust in order to power out of that situation. We also have something called ground speed mini, which is a minimum or ground speed minimum, where you're coming in on approach. You don't have to enter gusts in this airplane in the box. You just enter the speeds. It takes that speed, it subtracts it from the equation. It takes what the winds are, takes a third of your headwind component, and it adds either a third of the headwind component. So if you had 15 knots on the nose, it would add 5 knots, or a minimum of 5 knots, whichever is greater. Some of the older airplanes had a little bit more complicated, but that system with the auto thrust just ensures that even if you're in a strong headwind, the airplane is maintaining the same energy and the same speed over the ground. So there's a lot of cool features that come with the auto thrust system. I know we're short on time. I was going to ask you guys what this is. I know Jafaz knows. MCDU. Do you know what MCDU stands for?
MCDU. Multifunction display.
Multifunction control and display unit. So on Boeing's, they call it an FMS. On the Airbus, we call it a MCDU. And the MCDU on the Airbus functions very similar to an FMS on a Boeing, just that the down select that's on the Boeing aircraft, not on this, unless you're in AIRBUS, which is what I'm in right now. As you can see, I sent my little brother a message for his birthday using the MCDU. Hydraulics. Another feature I really like about the Airbus is it has a color-coded hydraulic system. So the engine 1 powers the green system, engine 2 powers the yellow system, and then you have a backup system powered by the rad and electric pump called the blue hydraulic system. So the green hydraulic system is powered by engine 1, also the PTU. If you've ever been on an Airbus, it sounds literally like a barking dog. The pressure differential between the systems is 500 PSI. Then the PTU kicks in, sounds like a barking dog to equalize the pressure between the systems. And the green system is just like what we talked about here. It powers all of these different systems on the airplane. Yellow system, again, engine 2, the PTU, if for whatever reason it's not producing 3000 PSI, it's outside of that by 500 PSI, and also electric pump. And then these are the systems that it operates as well. And then you have your blue system, which is powered by your rat and electric pump, and it controls the slats in the emergency generator. Another fun fact is the A320 has 4 flap settings, but 5 flap positions. And does anyone want to tell me what those flap positions are?
It would be 0, 1, 2, 3, and full.
Okay.
That sounds wrong. that okay. So
Are you-
Yeah, no. So you do have 0, 1, 2, 3, and full, but there's more. There's more.
Are you referring to like on the ground 1 plus F, where you get flaps and slats, and then in the air 1 only gives you flaps and no slats, or
Exactly.
slats?
So
Yeah,
there's
that kind of thing.
yeah, there you go. So so 0, if you count 0, then it would be 5 flap settings. So truly it should be 5 flap settings with 6 flap positions. But you also, for flap 1, you also have 1 plus F, which is based on logic. And in the question period, if you remember, you can ask me and I can tell you all about that, what that logic is. ECAM, want to take a stab what that means?
engine crew monitor.
Electronic centralized aircraft monitoring. So everyone is the rave right now. The rave right now is these electronic checklists, and oh wow, my airplane has electronic checklists and the like. But here's a 1980s aircraft that has this ECAM, which pretty much alerts the crew of anything that's abnormal and requires our attention. So in this situation, you have engine 1 fire. So with everything going on, the ECAM senses that there's an engine 1 fire. And now it pops up with this checklist, thrust lever 1 idle, engine master 1 off, and goes through all of these different things. And if there is a position or a switch associated with these things that are listed, when you action that item disappears. So with the ECAM system, you essentially have this electronic checklist that's able to assist you with emergencies. So for us, Airbus pilots, it really simplifies the emergency handling component. I know some guys are flying planes with big enunciators, and then you have to look at the enunciator and then the switch and then what your gauges are doing to determine what specifically is going on. In Airbus, it tells you what's wrong, and you're able to just simplify your approach. Oh, it's this. So what would we do now if we had this emergency? We'd go through our memory items, whatever our memory items are, then we'd go through these ECAM actions. We have a very specific order in terms of how we go through this dance. Once that's done, we'd go to our QRH, which is our quick reference handbook, look up anything that's related to the emergency and action those items. If it's not there, there's some things that are in the aircraft operating manual. And then from there, we clean up the whole emergency using an acronym that we use at Air Canada called ABCOT plus box. And the ABCOT is just a reminder or acronym to tell us that we need to talk to ATC, we need to talk to the back end, the company, we need to discuss overweight landing, and then we also need to talk about our time or ETA to land, and we need to talk about our TCAS, because when you're in a single engine situation, you can't react to TCAS. We have to change that instead of RA over to TA. And the box at the end just means to go into the McDo, clean up all the McDo items, and you're done. Most emergencies, if you follow this procedure, you have this very now simplified way to deal with something that is abnormal. So FCU, the flight control unit, so mode control panel on some airplanes. Airbus just likes to use different terms. So has anyone other than Jafaz heard about the Airbus FCU and why it's unique on Airbus? Okay, so has anyone heard of push-pull? Okay, Jafaz, can you go ahead, talk about the push-pull or?
Push in gives control to the aircraft, pull out selected, you take control and override what the aircraft wants to do.
Yeah, perfect. So exactly, so it's dependent on the phase. So if in any situation here on the speed, if I pulled on that situation, I go into selected speed, push, I go manage. Heading, pull on the heading, I'm now able to turn and select the heading, push. I'm no longer in heading, I go into nav. Whatever's in the McDo for routing, the airplane, if it's on an intercept heading, is gonna follow that. For altitude, if you have an altitude that's set above you, and you pull, it goes into open climb. If it's altitude that's below you and you pull, it goes into open descent. And then if you push, it goes into either a climb or push when it's below you. It goes into a managed descent if you are in nav mode here. And then the VS is slightly different. You pull to change and manipulate the VS, and you push to level off. And when I say push to level off, it doesn't mean the airplane is gonna level off at an altitude. It's now whatever the climb rate it's doing, you push, it says, oh, you want to be level, so it's gonna slow its rate of climb down until it gets to 0. So that's another unique feature that I like about Airbus is that. This is a very complicated part of the airplane, so we'll just kind of briefly brush through, because you could literally talk about this for days. But this is the primary flight display, which is our main display when we're flying the airplane. And again, I'll emphasize this again. Here you have an airplane that was designed in the 80s that has PFD that's now essentially the benchmark for modern instrumentation. And all they've done is taken that original design and modernized it. But it looks essentially the same to what it looked like back when it was first introduced. So I know there's a lot of airplanes that have PFDs, but I really like how Airbus is worked out, and literally everything the airplane's doing, you can know from the PFD. So at the top here, we have something called an FMA, which is a flight mode enunciator, and it's divided into different columns. And these columns refer to different things. So the first column refers to any of the auto thrust modes. This column refers to anything that's a vertical mode. This is a lateral mode. This talks about your approach capability. And then this is your auto flight status. So you're able to tell what's going on with the airplane from this, what we call flight mode enunciation. Anything in green is something that's an active mode. So you just say these and you have to, Airbus philosophy for flying, you have to read your FMA. And then anything that is blue on this typically is going to be an armed mode. So blue, armed, green, active. Now, if you move over here to this side, you have your speed tape, just like any other airplane. On this side, you have your altitude, just like any other airplane, with your VS, vertical speed, and then your heading and your track down here. The yellow line here shows what your actual heading is, and then this gives you the track that the airplane is flying. If you move over back to the speed tape, you'll see that this is blue. The speed bug is blue. In Airbus talk, that means that the speed is selected, blue by you. Most things that are blue is being done by myself. This blue right here, I know I said that that means it's armed, but also blue in this situation, I've set the MDA to 760. This blue right here, I've set the altitude to 4,000 and the airplane is descending to that. We talked about the flight control laws. The PFD tells you that the airplane is in the correct or is in normal law just by looking at it. These little check marks here, those are at 67 degrees. That's your bank limit. You can't see the 30 here, but there's some marks like this, which are at 30. That's your pitch limit if you're pulling back on the stick. These are at 15 degrees. That's your pitch limit here as well. So just by looking at this, you can tell that you're in normal law. If it turns amber, then you're in alternate law. So you can tell right away, the ECAM is going to tell you, but you know that it's in amber. And then as well, if you have amber here with the pitch trim, that means you're in direct. And if it's in red, man pitch trim only, then that means you're in mechanical backup, and it would be up here at the top. This on the speed tape means this top part right here is a max AOA for that AOA protection. If the speed ever drops below here, the airplane doesn't want the speed to drop below here, but if for whatever reason it does, the airplane will not allow you to command an AOA greater than this. So that's your max AOA. We call that V alpha max. At here, right here, this is a protection speed. We call that V alpha prot. the airplane doesn't want to go below V alpha prot. If it ends up getting down into this regime right here below V alpha prot, we talked about it earlier, somewhere between V alpha prot and V alpha max, that's where it would command something called alpha floor. VLS right here, that's the lowest selectable speed. And here on our speed tape, we have an arrow. So that is just telling us, and if our acceleration is faster than 2 knots per second, then that arrow shows up. And that arrow just means that over the next 10 seconds, I'm going to be doing 165 knots if everything remains the same. So there's a lot of information on the PFD. Some things that weren't included on that slide, right here, this is V max, and that V max is a combination of at least, I think, 5 different speeds. So I think it's VMO, MMO, VLE, VFE, so yeah, and then whichever is lower. So whatever your speed limit, if based on the gear, the aircraft structure, the flaps, that's going to be demonstrated right here. And then 6 knots into, oh, let me go back, 6 knots into that tape, that's the high speed protection that we talked about there. Green dot, that's an Airbus thing. Remind me, I could talk about that at the end if you want. And then when you're in descent mode, you have a bracketed econ speed. So it gives you a bracket of speeds to fly in the descent. As I said, you can talk about this for days. I just want to show you a few things that are unique to the Airbus. No, I didn't have any on that, okay. The flap speeds would show on here as well. So when you can lower, when you need to raise, your minimum speed for raising flaps, your slats. So it would show you all of that. This magenta now means that's managed. So that's a managed speed that's being controlled by the McDo. This is a rattle that's here. We're flying an ILS. This is the ILS chorus. This is the track. Outer marker symbol. Here's a glide path. This is a VNAV function, so vertical deviation function if you're following a vertical navigation. And then right here, we have our flight path. So that is showing you when you're in track FPA mode, it's showing you the path that the airplane is flying through the sky, an actual path that the airplane is flying through the sky versus just a pitch. So based on the different types of approach we fly, sometimes we go into that mode. I rushed through some of those. I know there's so much detail. This airplane is incredibly complex. Every day that I fly it, I'm learning so much more, and literally you could talk about it for days on end because it's just so complicated and there's so many aspects to it. I hope you enjoyed this brief overview of my journey. Hopefully I was able to give you a few interesting insights about flying at Air Canada and flying the Airbus A320. As I mentioned earlier, I believe that we are still in an amazing and growing industry, and the only limit in this industry is yourself. So with a little bit of work, some persistence, and absolutely all the passion that you can obtain, I don't think that there's anything that can stop anyone that wants to achieve their goals in this industry. So I want to say thanks to Roderick and the Aeronautical Club of the West Indies for allowing me to present. I'm so honored with this opportunity, and I hope you enjoyed this presentation. So we'll open up the floor for some questions.
All right, thanks. I have a question. It's from Sharik. Don't mean to put him on the spot, but you've probably spoken to him while flying into Kingston. So he was asking to tell the difference between the FMC and MDU and your yeah, and your Airbus FMC thing.
So sorry, I don't know if I understand.
Oh, he was asking if you could explain the difference between FMC, Boeing, and what you guys use in the Airbus.
So I mean, typically the Boeing they operate very similar. The difference with the McDo on the Airbus is very slight, in just that there's no drop select function. Let me go back to that slide. Unless you're in ACARS. So like this, so I mean, the line select keys here are the same, very similar to Airbus. or Boeing, I should say, same on this side. The buttons and some of the subpages are different in the layout. With a Boeing aircraft, so say in Boeing, if I had this line right here, in my ACARS on the Airbus, I'm able to push this button again, and then that line would come down here, and then I'm able to push this button here, and then bring that line up. In the regular function on the McDo, you don't have that ability. So for a lot of the Boeing guys, they do struggle with that in terms of not having that functionality to, like, say you're going from Toronto to Ottawa, and then Toronto was your alternate. Boeing, you could literally hit Toronto here, put it down here, and then drop it back in the alternate. Where on the Airbus, you can't do that. The performance functions in this airplane, the plane literally walks through all the performance functions, maybe similar on a Boeing, I don't know, but those are some of the, I guess some of the differences with the McDo and the FMS. Literally, they operate very similar. It's a naming thing. When I flew the Hercules, we had something called a CNIMU, which is essentially an FMS. So different manufacturers sometimes call them different things. Does that answer your question?
Yes, yes, it does. The end part. So apparently, I asked the question wrongly, but yeah, correctly at the end, because he was saying if it's the same thing as if MCDU is the same as FMS, basically. So you just say,
hello.
Basically, yes.
Can I talk?
Okay, perfect.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, go ahead. Sure. Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
All right. How are you doing? No, what I was saying, the term FMC compared to FMS. I thought that FMS was a Boeing term and FMC was an Airbus term. Correct me if I'm wrong. So,
no, FMGC is an Airbus term, or FMGCU, but FMC.
So what is FMC?
FMC refers to the computing that's going on behind, flight management computer, or sorry, the computer itself is a FMC, and then the FMS is the actual system, if that makes sense. So
FMC is not an Airbus term?
No, it's not. FM, yeah, no, it's not an Airbus.
I think that corroborates what I was saying in the chat, Shark, where I was saying that the FMC is basically the hardware and the FMS is the software. Would that be a right or correct thing to say?
Yeah, that would be very correct.
To assist answering that question, which I'll do more research to, is that the FMC, which is the computer, the aircraft has two of those or three in some system, and the FMS, they would have one or two in some aircraft. So like the King Air is one FMS but two FMC.
Exactly.
So basically, one is a system where it takes information from both and ensure that there's no conflicting analysis of air data, and then presents that to the pilot. So the system takes a reading from both computers and ensure that they are both agreeing. If there is a disparity in the system or the system shows different thing, then it will alert that something is wrong, and then the pilot will have to diagnose it. So one is a system or collective of many computers working together, and the FMC is an individual computer working by itself that feeds the collective.
Yeah, and then so like, I mean, if you're talking about this actual box, to be technically correct, the box would be the FMC in a Boeing aircraft, and in an Airbus aircraft, this is the MCDU, McDo.
Hello, as it pertains to the FMC in an Airbus, right? Like, have you been in any instances where you enter the flight data into the FMC and into the FMS, you have some numerical error, because sometimes in some aircrafts it can be like a flight data error, which can cause a bit of misconfusion with the aircraft systems. Have you ever been in any situations like that before?
Well, the thing is, like, if it pertains to anything that's going to alter or change the flight plan, or routing, especially like if air traffic. One thing that's common is that we punch in all the time when we're flying is waypoints, right? So going direct to a waypoint, we have to confirm that with the other pilot before we put it in. And then in terms of parameters, each of, like if I was on a performance page, the parameters knows that if I put in a 3-digit temperature, it's like format error and it won't take it. You know, so it's smart in that respect. But there are times where you could put in something erroneously, but based on the checks and balances that we have in place in terms of how we enter critical information or how we change critical information in the McDo, we mitigate against that.
Okay, another question as well. Based on your observation in the airline industry, on your projection for the next, I would say, 10 to 20 years, would you say Airbus will be the more preferable airline selection and Boeing will be out in the shadows by that time?
It's hard to predict because here's the thing: the competition is good, and I like both of them. I've never flown a Boeing aircraft, but Boeing, you know, credit where credit's due, has made some iconic aircraft, and they know how to make good airplanes. So I think that they'll continue to do that, and we want competition because the competition forces us to innovate. And we also have to remember that one aircraft changes the game all the time. So let's say, for instance, the 787. When Boeing was in the process of making the 787, Airbus was focusing on the A380. So they were really late to the game in terms of having that new composite large twin aisle aircraft. So in that respect, if you took a snapshot at that moment in time, not knowing if the industry was going to a point-to-point, more oriented, or a hub and spoke type system, you would think that Boeing definitely had the advantage and that Airbus would be left in the shadows. But then here comes along the A350. And even though they didn't have first mover advantage, as with the 787, they were able to look at the 787, all the systems that are on the 787, and determine what they wanted to use and improve on those systems. And I you know, arguably, I think this A350 is a better airplane than the 787. I know some Boeing people will say otherwise, but you know, based on numbers, I think it's a better performing airplane. And plus, it has a wider range. So the 787 and 777 do the job that, you know, the A350 family can do for both of those airplanes. So aviation's dynamic like that. In one airplane can completely change the game. So as long as they continue to innovate and do beautiful things, which they are doing, they'll be back into the game. The 777X could be a game changer. Who knows?
Could I say I'm a Boeing baby, and you've just confirmed something that I've told Richard, where Boeing has always set the precedence and pioneer the technology, and then Airbus comes along and improve it. Where you say they look at the 787 and improve the 350, and they tried with the A380 to compete with the 747. The only mistake I see Boeing made was trying to chase the 320neo, where they come up with the 737 MAX. That was a total failure. They should have gone and rebuilt the 757 and bring it as the 757X or 797 something.
Yes,
however,
I agree.
Both aircraft have their advantages in operation. Both aircraft have their advantages in price, and both manufacturers set out on different aspects and reason for being what they are and doing what they're doing. The fact that when it comes to technology in terms of integration, I would say Airbus has the advantage. When it comes to technology and say in flying and producing economic machines, both for pilots and maintenance, I'll say Boeing have the advantage. But it's not to take away from any aircraft, because being an aviator, as long as it have wings and engines, I'm interested.
And here's the thing, I work for Air Canada. So if Air Canada gets rid of their A320 and I have to fly a 737, I'm not gonna not fly a 737. I'll go and fly a 737. It's an airplane. I'm excited to fly it. So just like what you said, yeah, I mean, can go deep into that one with respect to how the Neo and the Max came to be, but yeah, it can all change with one aircraft. As we're seeing with Boeing right now, it has changed with that one aircraft to their detriment. But when the Max is fixed, it's going to be a great airplane. Is it going to be as advanced as the A320 Neo? No, but just like our brother just said a while ago, it has its operation and cost advantages that are going to prove itself well for the carriers that want to operate it. So the competition is great, and we need that competition to continue to push and you know, innovation and allow us to have the best aircraft possible from either manufacturer.
Another question as well, does all fleets for the Airbus A320s are manufactured with Rolls-Royce engines?
No, I don't have Rolls-Royce engines on my airplane. I have CFM, and some have AIE engines. So no, they're not all. The operator usually picks the engines that they want on their aircraft. On our 330s, we have Rolls-Royce engines. They're triple spool Rolls-Royce engines, and they're EPA rated. On our airplane, the 320, we're using CFM engines, and they are N1.
To answer the question with engines, the operators choose the engine best to their familiarity in terms of maintenance and storage of parts and location of operation. In North American countries, they will go for Pratt & Whitney and American made because of parts and ease of shipping engines to manufacture. And in Europe, they will go for European made engines. Likewise, based on shipping engines closer to manufacture and parts. And besides, they are polarizing when it comes to whether the Europeans make better engines than the North Americans. But it's just like the aircraft. So don't really matter as long as the engines work. I guess that's the main thing.
Absolutely.
All right, guys. So so we're at the end of today's meeting. I hope you guys, you know, took out a lot from this meeting, like I did. You know, it was very thorough, very detailed. I learned a lot, and I'd like to thank Demar for this presentation. You know, he's very busy, and he took the time out to, you know, do this thing for us. So Demar, I'd like to thank you on behalf of the Aeronautical Club of the West Indies. I'd like to thank all the members that came on the meeting. Thank you guys for joining. I see Gianni, we haven't seen you in a while, Gianni, so glad to have you back again. We had a fellow Airbus pilot on earlier. You know, this is what we're here for. We're here to share knowledge and learn from industry professionals. You know, so whenever enthusiasts decide to venture out in the field, you know, they're going in the field with a fair knowledge, you know. So I'd like to thank you again, Demar, for this lovely presentation. So, you know, they always say, I don't know if it's a Jamaican slang or something, but I always hear old people with it. The reward for good work, you know, is always more work. You know?
Yeah. I hope Gianni approved of this presentation. He's another Airbus pilot. I don't see him anywhere, but yeah. If you can hear me, Mr. Gianni, I hope you approved of this Airbus presentation. Hopefully it was represented well.
Yeah, bro.
Gianni?
Actually, I'm actually a boy.
Oh, you're a Boeing guy. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so thanks much again, guys. As I said earlier, we are going to be transitioning into face-to-face meetings We're going to do it hybrid style, so still do the Zoom part of it for those who can't make it, and still do the face-to-face. So in the coming days, you guys will hear more about that. And just enjoy the rest of the day, guys. You know, thanks again to Demar and all who turned out today.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was a pleasure. Thank you, guys. Enjoy your day.
Thanks, Demar. Thanks, guys.